All right, this is lightning talk number 4. This is John Constable from the Wellcome Sanger Institute. NFSRODS deployment and performance tuning. 8.5 minutes, go.
Hello, everybody. Right, so I'm just going to briefly talk about the NFSRODS deployment that we have at Sanger, why we did it, the different things we did for testing it, and where it's going from here. So we have NFSRODS because some of the users needed file system access with ACLs, particularly with UID mapping to iWADS users. So the normal user they are on the Unix file system maps to the user they are in iWADS. And GDPR means we can't just export the file system as NFS like we do for another zone. For this particular group, we need to preserve the ACLs. And we didn't want to reinvent the wheel. The informatics group here in particular are archiving the users' data from Lustre, and they needed a way they could show the end users easily that the data was still there, basically. And that meant they could clear it off the high performance file system and free up space there. We didn't have Metal NX at the point we started with this, so we wanted this was the approach we thought we'd take. We also wanted a file system interface to the data for Genome browser, which is a web-based genome browsing tool that talks directly to a file system. So the first time we tried deploying it, fairly naive. We brought up a couple of virtual machines in our OpenStack instance, one of which had NFSRODS on it, the other one with the NFS client, and we pointed it directly at our Federation master, in this case Sanger 1, which then talked to the HumGen zone. This was really slow. It had so many layers of abstraction that it took, I was trying to dig out the figures earlier, but I couldn't find them properly. It took something like 5 minutes, I think, to get ILS responses, which was clearly, or LS responses, excuse me, which was clearly way beyond what anyone would happily tolerate. So we then tore that down and instead pointed this pretty much similar setup directly at the provider for the HumGen zone. That worked a lot quicker, but it was still much laggier than we were hoping for, and certainly more than the average file system browser would expect to put up with the interactive browser. So for the third time, we put the NFS serve NFSRODS and the provider for that HumGen zone on the same instance, and then we pointed the NFS client at it from a separate machine. So this basically meant that we had a very easy deployment of the NFSRODS instance, which we could scale out. We could deploy several numbers of these in one go. So overall, we find NFSRODS is actually really quite slow, and this is because it's single-threaded. It doesn't do parallel transfer, so that's fine for some things, but not good for larger files that people want to access, particularly where they're trying to zip between the files and that kind of thing within the files rather. And our users are used to NFS performance at a minimum and Lustre at a maximum, so they would notice slow access speeds. We also found that some of the collections that have been uploaded had 65,000 files at least in one collection. And this wasn't just a one-off; we had lots of it. We had to go through a lot of iterations with Renzi to try and find out exactly what was going on with this. And I think earlier on, I know people gave a talk about NFSRODS and talked about the caching, and that was one of the things that came out of this. But also, I think in our sense, I think some of it has been pointed at how Oracle, which is our backend database for the catalog, has been interpreting some of these queries, and we might better have a better SQL for this from the Oracle side. It also reminded people again that color LS is bad. That's where you have LS minus color, and it does all kinds of nice things to show you what the files are in different color outputs. But those nice things that it's doing behind the scenes is lots of metadata lookup, which means there are lots of requests behind the scenes to NFSRODS, and so it goes really, really slow and times like that. The other thing that we found was that we had a lot of confusion over users because we were pointing the NFSRODS directly at the sub-zone, but most of our users came in via the federation zone. Then the zone owner basically had to do a lot of work to make sure the ACLs were applied for both the local user to the zone, which was the one that the NFSRODS was passing the UI data across as, but also the same permissions applied to the federation user that was coming in. And unfortunately, the people that were doing this actually have a number of pipelines ingesting this kind of data, and so it's fairly trivial for them to add this information in and then to kind of backport this kind of thing in. But it's something in a federation that could easily trip people up, and certainly it led to a number of confusing conversations over, well, that is the JC18 account. No, it's a JC18 account on that zone, not this zone. And what? They're not the same. No, they're different. They're federations, and they're actually different logical things, and all that kind of stuff. So that was quite a lot of confusion. In the future, we're not quite sure where we're going to go with that, but we do know that with this particular design, we potentially could horizontally scale the NFSRODS servers across quite a lot, as each one is pretty much independent in its own right. It's got its own provider, it's got its own NFSRODS. Then you could presumably scale a number of these up and use some kind of DNS load balancer across this to provide much faster speed. Now, we've not tried this, it's just kind of a hypothetical kind of thing, but we might get that out at some point. The other thing we're looking at the same time is DAVRODS to see whether it can perform a similar function, particularly if we map that with the Linux tool will allow you to map WebDAV as a folder. Will it be any better? We don't know. Ask me next UGM, and I'll hopefully be able to get you more information. And that's it.
Right on time. It's pretty good. I don't think there's any, just a bunch of yaks have been posted in the chat. So I think you get off clean on this one. Yeah, we're happy to continue to work and make it faster. We haven't really thought about the load balancing either. So that's interesting. Thank you.